Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. I thought that I would sort of review this card and kind of give you guys my predictions of the five fight cards that are going to be happening next Saturday, January 16th. I thought that I would post it a week in advance. Max Holloway is going to be on this card. Max Holloway has attracted a lot of fans to the UFC. I believe he also gained a big following, especially over a certain amount of the Latino crowd, probably when he ended up defeating Brian Ortega, as Brian Ortega is a Mexican American fighter. And if you know the Latinos, especially the Mexicans and the Mexican Americans, they are, they love fighting. They're very big into it. But when it comes down to it overall, we're going to predict this whole entire card. This should attract a decent amount of attention with this card because overall, Max Holloway always brings in, a lot of butts and seats. So we'll see what happens. But this is a pretty decent card. So we're going to predict all five of these cards. And let's just see overall who we got here. So the first fight is going to be Soriano versus Todorovic. I believe that Soriano is going to win this fight. I believe he's just a more well-rounded striker. He seems to have decent wrestling. Todorovic is a decent wrestler. Both of these guys have gotten a certain amount of stoppages, so we'll see what happens here. But the thing that I didn't like about Todorovic when I did some research on him and watched some of his fights, his chin is a little bit too high up in the air. He seems a little bit hittable when it comes down to it. And Soriano seems just like a more disciplined fighter to me. He seems like a more well-rounded fighter. So I'm going to go with Soriano in this fight. I believe he will win by knockout within the first two rounds. That's just my opinion of the matter, but we'll see what happens. So I'm going with Soriano in this fight. I believe he's just a more well-rounded fighter. I don't like the fact that Todorovic has his chin usually a little bit too high up in the air. He looks a little bit too hittable to me, and he does not necessarily look like he has the same athletic gifts as a Soriano does either. So we'll just see what happens. But that's my prediction for that. And that leads us to our next fight. Joaquin Buckley versus Alessio Di Chirico. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Hopefully I am. Anyways, so this fight is a very interesting one. When I did some research on Alessio, because I've seen Joaquin Buckley a couple times. When I did some research on Alessio, he also is a very good puncher. Decent counter puncher. Both of these guys actually somewhat fight the same, but the thing I didn't like about Alessio is kind of the same thing I didn't like about Todorovic. He seems not as defensively responsible as Buckley, and it seems like overall he would be able to get hit a little bit more. Now, can he hurt Buckley? Can he stun him? He certainly can. Alessio is a very good puncher, decent counter puncher, so we'll see what happens with that. But when it comes down to it, I'm going to go with Joaquin Buckley because I think that he is very powerful, overall. And I just think he's a little bit more defensively responsible. I think he's going to catch Alessio before Alessio catches him. Well, if I should say this. If Alessio does catch him, I think that Joaquin Buckley can handle it better because I think he is more defensively responsible. And I think he's less likely to get hit than Alessio is. But that's just my opinion of the matter. And Joaquin Buckley, for those of you guys that don't know him, he's known for that one knockout against, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's responsible for that one spinning back kick knockout to that guy's face when his leg was kind of being held up in the air. For a certain amount of you guys that don't remember that, you can look it up on YouTube. Just look up Joaquin Buckley KO and you'll find it. But anyways, so I'm going to go with Joaquin Buckley. I think that he's going to win, possibly by decision. I believe overall that, it could be by knockout, but I'm going to go with decision on this one. Let's go with decision. I believe that he's going to outstrike him. Let's just see what happens, But would I be surprised if it's by knockout? I wouldn't be surprised at all. We'll just have to see what happens. But I'm going to go with Joaquin Buckley, and I'll go with decision. Let's just say that. But anyway, so this next fight is Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Li Jingliang or Jin Liang, I believe is how you pronounce that. Once again, I'm not the best with name pronunciation, so I apologize. But anyways, when it comes to, and I've only seen Li in one fight, against Neil Magny. So I tried to do my research. I couldn't find overall how to pronounce his name correctly, but I believe I'm saying it right. Correct me if I'm wrong. But anyways, so I know Santiago. I know both fighters really, but I've seen Santiago more fights. I've seen him in a couple of decent fights. I remember when he knocked out Gunnar Nelson. I remember when he beat the hell out of Neil Magny. This dude, at 170, and 170 is a very talented division right now. You have Jorge Masvidal, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington, Tyron Woodley. You have all those guys. Santiago has kind of been absent for the past couple of years. Santiago, in my opinion, is Gilbert Burns. I forgot about Gilbert Burns. Santiago is just as much of a threat as some of those other top contenders, in my opinion. Santiago may be the hardest puncher at 170 today. When I see him punch people, he knocks them out cold. I've never seen Neil Magny beat up to the point that Santiago beat him up. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and watch that fight. Santiago put a clinic on this man. That the man can punch. He has dynamite in both hands, and you do not want to get hit by this guy. You know, he's a very, very good fighter. Now, his wrestling, I can't really remember how experienced he is on the ground or wrestling. I haven't really seen him on the ground that much, so I'm not sure really how well he would handle someone like a Colby Covington or a Kamaru Usman, and Gilbert Burns as well, because Gilbert can fight on the ground too. But that'd be, what would be an interesting fight after this fight if he does win, and I do predict he is going to win, because Lee, I do think overall that he's not the worst fighter in the world. He seems to have decent wrestling, and he seems overall to have decent striking, but he does seem to lose steam, as the fight goes on. And I just think he's a little bit too hittable. I don't think he's as defensively responsible. And with someone like Santiago, who's a very disciplined striker and someone who is that powerful, I don't think that you can risk being not that defensively responsible. I believe Santiago is going to win this fight. I believe he's going to win by first or second round knockout. So I'm going to say a knockout within the first 2 rounds. Let's see what happens there. But it'll be interesting. I predict Santiago Ponzinibbio to win this fight. I'm very excited for his return. Let's see what happens. But a good fight for Santiago next. I'm trying to think who's there at 170 right now. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson maybe would be a pretty decent fight. That would not be a bad fight. Maybe man. Who else? I don't know. I would actually like to see Santiago versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Wonderboy Thompson, I think, is ranked at like number 5 right now. That'd be a very decent fight for Santiago. He's proved himself against the, top 15, the lower part of the top 15. But can he handle himself against the top 5 right now? Because the top 5 is pretty solid. That's the question. So that'd be a great fight after this fight, because I am very confident that Santiago is going to win this fight. This is the fight that I'm most confident in. So we'll see what happens. But I'm going to go with Santiago in this fight. This next fight against Carlos Condit and Matt Brown, to be honest with you, and I think a certain amount of people will probably share my opinion on this, Carlos Condit and Matt Brown, in my opinion, should not even be fighting anymore. Both of them are not the same fighters that they used to be. Matt Brown, in my opinion, probably was never an A-class fighter, even though certain people would disagree with that. But, Matt Brown is not even the same fighter today that he was back then. Matt Brown lost his last fight, although I can't remember who it was against, although he won, I believe, 2 fights prior to that. Carlos Condit won his last fight, but then before then, I believe he lost 5 fights in a row. So these are not 2 people at the peaks of their career. But if I had to predict who overall is going to win this one, I'm going to go with Carlos Condit. He is the younger guy here. He's 36. Matt Brown is 40. And on top of that, I do believe that Carlos Condit, overall just has enough to beat Matt Brown. He usually throws a lot of volume with his strikes. When it comes down to the overall, I believe he's going to outthrow Matt Brown. I believe he's going to be more accurate than Matt Brown. I believe he's just going to outstrike him, is what I believe is going to happen. Now, I believe it's going to be by decision. If it ended up being by knockout, would I be surprised? No, I wouldn't be overly surprised, but, on either end. But when it comes down to it, I believe that Carlos Condit is going to win this fight by unanimous decision. We'll see what happens. And that, ladies and gentlemen, leads us to our last fight. Max Holloway versus Calvin Kattar. Whew. Okay. Well, so Calvin Kattar, I know for sure, has won his last 2 fights, I believe. One was against Jeremy Stephens, and the other one, I think it was against Dan Ige. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I know he lost his Zabit, Russian fighter, and then I think he won against Dan Ige and then Jeremy Stephens, whichever order it is. But I'm pretty sure he's won his last 2 fights. Calvin Kattar has been one of the more rising stars as of late. Good knockout power, decent striking ability. So he is a dangerous fighter. Max Holloway, he always attracts a lot of butts and seats. He always attracts a lot of the fans, especially after that Brian Ortega fight, because there was a lot of hype behind Brian Ortega. Max Holloway has been in a lot of big fights, man. As we all know, he has suffered 3 losses in his last 4 fights. One to Dustin Poirier, then he won against Frankie Edgar, then he lost twice to Alexander Volkanovski. A lot of people thought that he actually won against Alexander Volkanovski in their rematch. In the first fight, I didn't even think it was close. I thought Volkanovski won all 5 rounds. And a certain amount of people overall would disagree with that. It is what it is. One thing you notice about Max Holloway fans is that overall they think Max wins every single fight dominantly, even if he didn't. So that explains why so many people thought Volkanovski robbed Max Holloway in the second fight, but it is what it is. And in the second fight, you can argue that Max Holloway won it. But do I have a problem with Volkanovski getting the decision? No, I don't, because I thought the fight was a toss-up. The first 2 rounds, I think, went to Max Holloway. The third round could have went either way, and the last 2, I thought, went to Volkanovski. That's just my personal opinion on it, but it is what it is. And I've already told people this about Max Holloway. Max Holloway is a great fighter, but he does have an overrated skill set. Overall, sometimes he does not get off-center, meaning that he does not move his head very well. He can be hit. He is not as defensively responsible as you would like him to be. He does not avoid leg kicks very well when it comes down to the overall. And if you have a very seasoned striker in there, he does have a chance to lose, which makes this fight very interesting, because Calvin Kattar has very good punching power. He's a very decent striker, and he seems to be pretty decent over the course of 5 rounds. So that's what makes this fight so interesting. Now, I don't think Calvin Kattar is going to knock Max Holloway out. If Dustin Poirier, who debatably is the hardest puncher at 155, can't knock Max Holloway out, I don't think anybody's going to knock this dude out besides maybe Conor McGregor. But when it comes down to the overall, bottom line is this. Max Holloway is a tough SOB, and even though he is coming off of 2 losses, and I even agree with the decision in the second Alexander Volkanovski fight as well, even though a lot of people would disagree. But when it comes down to it, I believe Max Holloway is going to win this fight. I believe he's going to win this fight by decision. If it would be by knockout, I wouldn't be overly surprised. Max Holloway, kind of like Carlos Condit, he throws with a lot of volume. He throws a lot of punches, throws a lot of different combinations, throwing them from certain angles. But sometimes Max Holloway is a little bit too straightforward and back. So this will be a tough fight. I believe Calvin Kattar will get his punches in there. I think maybe even Calvin Kattar would win 1 round. If this was even a 2 rounds to 3 fight, I wouldn't be surprised. But I can't see it going Calvin Kattar's way, next week. And I just can't see it. Calvin Kattar, I think, is a very good fighter, but I don't see him on the same level as an Alexander Volkanovski or a Max Holloway or a Zabit. I don't see him on that same level. So it is what it is. I believe Calvin Kattar is going to lose this fight. Would I be overly surprised if he won this fight? No. What I would be surprised is that if Calvin Kattar did win this fight and he won by knockout. That would really shock me. But I don't think that's going to happen. But it is what it is. Anyways, I'm going with Max Holloway in this fight by decision or late stoppage. I'm going to say decision. Unanimous decision, most likely. I believe he will come back. I would also like to see Max Holloway go up to 155. Because I've already said this. And once again, a certain amount of people would disagree with me, but there's a reason why Max Holloway has not looked overly impressive at 155. In my opinion, Max Holloway, although he is a very, great fighter to a certain degree, he does have an overrated skill set when it comes down to the overall. And what I mean by that, once again, is that he does not move his head around very well. Sometimes he is not defensively responsible and he can get hit, and we've seen that against Dustin Poirier. All right, where I thought Dustin Poirier, to be honest with you, won that fight 4 rounds to 1. But it is what it is. So I'd like to see him at 155. Because in my opinion, that's where Max Holloway truly belongs. That's the same people that really, they might outweigh him by a little bit, but they're pretty much the same physical dimensions. Max Holloway, is somebody to where I'm not sure if he would really last that well at 155. Now some people overall might say, well, if he wouldn't last very well at 155, why do you want to see him go up to 155? Well, it's just more of a personal, thing to where overall I want to see how well he does there. Because if he loses this fight, let's say, there really would be no reason for him to stay at 145 when it comes down to the overall, at least not for me. And I would love to see Max Holloway fight at 155. I think that's more his natural weight anyway when it comes down to it. And I think overall that there could be some great fights there. And that would really answer me the question if he would, do well against the fighters like Justin Gaethje, Tony Ferguson, Charles Oliveira, those type of guys. But anyway, that's really about it. Thank you so much for watching. So my predictions are going to be Max Holloway, Carlos Canas, Santiago Ponzinibbio, Joaquin Buckley, and Serrano. So pretty much all the men who are favored. But we'll see what happens. Anyways, guys, that's really about it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later.